everybody. Welcome to the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast. This is episode 128, and I'm really excited about this episode because if you've listened for a while, you'll know that I love to share people's stories, people's personal thyroid stories, and today you're in for a treat because I have Craig who is willing to share his thyroid story with you all. And if you are in my Let's Talk Thyroid community on Facebook, Craig might be familiar to you because he's often posting and sharing, things that have been working for him or, what's different tips and tricks that he's come across, in terms of managing his thyroid health. And so I love that. That's part of what builds a community. And so I was really, really kind of thought, I'd love to hear Craig's full story. And so that is, I'm going to introduce you to Craig, who's from all the way from the UK. So very early in the morning for him. For me, it's very civilized time of the afternoon. So welcome, Craig, to the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast.
Thank you, Annabelle, for having me. And I am excited to share my story, my journey with yourself and your amazing listeners. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, that's a pleasure. Because you've listened to a lot of the stories that have already been shared on this podcast, but I don't think aside from, various, professional guests that I've had on, I haven't had any men share their personal thyroid stories. And we know that Hashimoto's and thyroid conditions do affect men less, but it's still less. I don't mean affect you less, but is less common is probably a better way of putting it. But I love the fact that, that you're here to represent at least some men. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. And it is quite quiet from a male point of view. However, the advice and the guidance is the same regardless anyway. So yeah, great to represent a small portion of our community.
Yeah. Actually, talking about men, male specific thyroid, maybe symptoms or concerns is something that's been on my list of topics to cover on the podcast. So I'll store that one, keep that one stored away. I've got a list of probably about, it's always checking in, but about 20 different topics that we haven't covered yet that I'm still often looking for the right person to cover. So, men and thyroid conditions are still there as because a lot of things are the same, but there'll be a few unique differences. So
absolutely.
Craig, tell us, you're in the UK, tell us a little bit about you, whatever you feel comfortable sharing with us, and then we're going to dive into your thyroid story.
Yeah, so my name's Craig. I'm currently 51. I live in Newport, South Wales, within the UK. I live with my partner, Chris, and my son, Josh, lives just around the corner from ourselves. So they are actively part of my life and support and all that kind of stuff there. So typical person, really. So I do enjoy a bit of socializing. So there may be a couple of cheeky cocktails within all of that. But the same as everybody else. We're busy managing our lives, aren't we? So between working in health and safety for a transport company, in essence, it is quite a fast-paced environment for me in terms of the responsibility and everything like that. I do have a little bit of an A-type personality. Annabelle, you've mentioned that previously on your podcast there. So I can be quite driven at times. So I enjoy things that normal people enjoy in the grand scheme of things. I am a bit of an eternal student though as well. So certainly for myself, I'm always going, and what's next? So whilst I do like the downtime, I do like to, I get leisurely walks in the summer when we have the summer months in the UK. I always find myself kind of coming back and going, what course am I going to do next? Which I think has put me in good stead with the challenges that I've faced over the past few years as well. It's allowed me to go into a little bit of a detective mode and to find some answers for myself and research things. So, I love food. I've always loved food. It is the way that I celebrate people and my family and friends. So to be on a radical food change over the past few months has been really interesting for me. So love food, always have loved food. And so to be exploring new things, which I'm sure we'll talk about shortly, has been a little bit of an adventure for me as well. My mantra, my key phrase, I have been listening to your podcast since I discovered it, done all the back catalogue, and your book is my Bible. Let me be very honest with you, it's never far away from me. I certainly heard everything that you've said, and having that word is really important to me. So my word of choice is fascinated. So I like to get fascinated by everything, and to go and exploring and what does that mean to me and other people around me. So just a little bit of an insight into who I am.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, there's a number of things I'm going to pick up on that, and I want to be fascinated about your fascinating story. And I love, definitely I'm a words person, and that's such a helpful word to have, in a health context, is to be fascinated. And I love the positive spin that has on it, because as you say, that when you're talking about making radical changes, to be able to look at that in a constructive way is really setting yourself up for success. So that's great. And I'm going to pick up on the food. I want to pick up on your A-type personality and your study. Lots of those different things are going to come out a bit more, I'm sure, in the conversation. But so Craig, when were you diagnosed with and it's Hashimoto's you've got?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So when were you diagnosed?
If I go back a little bit further, so I'm going to go back to 2019, really.
Okay.
For me, I'm not sure how I became aware of a potential thyroid issue. I'm not sure if it was just, matching up, why am I fatigued? Why am I gaining the weight? And why I'm always cold? So in 2019, I did a home test. So similar to like the lateral flow test that we all were doing in COVID. So there was a simple test you could buy online that either gave you a yes or a no answer, in essence.
Wow, that's right. I've never heard of a home thyroid test. Was
it
okay.
Yeah, they're quite popular in the UK. So it is a little bit of I'm not sure if it was a blood test or a saliva test. I think it was a blood test in all essence. And it just indicated with your similar to a pregnancy test, really. You get the one line or the two lines. So I completed one of those just out of curiosity in 2019. I spoke to, and the result on that indicated that there may have been something there. So I reached out to my doctor, and she was quite willing to make an appointment so we could get the formal tests done. The world went a bit chaotic then, didn't it, with the onset of COVID-19? So other priorities came to the forefront. So I kind of didn't ignore it, but it wasn't a priority priority in the grand scheme of things. So I took the opportunity to then change careers and all of that stuff. Working in health and safety is never enough.
Global crisis.
So type A personality strikes again. So as I progressed into the say 2021, 2022, I had a series of ailments. I'll label it that way. So I started with a frozen shoulder, neck ache. I then started with shooting pains from the back of my neck all the way up to the base of my skull, along with sleep issues, fatigue, weight gain. And I've been a member of my local, we've got a group in the UK called Slimming World. So one of my closest friends, Lisa Norris, runs a group. So I've been part of Lisa's group, and I'm part of her team that runs that group with her. So I recognise weight has been a challenge for me, but with Lisa and the group there, I've learned what a healthy, balanced diet for a normal person should look like. So across those few years, I just felt really, really poorly. And at one point, I recognized that I was living on a combination of paracetamol, ibuprofen, and any kind of creams and lotions and potions to kind of relieve
all
pain.
the aches and
So
pains.
it got to the point where I'd had COVID during a kind of 3-year period, probably 3 times. And I did the famous thing that we probably all do. I Googled my symptoms. So the
the online
Dr. Google.
diagnosis. Yeah.
So the symptoms matched up with long COVID. So at that point, the kind of late 23, middle 23, really, I just had enough, reached out to my doctor, and she said, come on, we'll book you in for a longer appointment than normal. So went over, she listened to all my symptoms, made me step on the scales and said, I was carrying some weight, which I knew already. And
it never really comes as a surprise, does it?
No, you kind of, this is my reality. I completely understand.
I think I know that. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
So she was actually really empathetic to me. So she diagnosed me initially with something called trapeziumyalgia, which is technically a pain in the neck. So there wasn't much I could do around that realistically. But she gave me some, lifestyle advice and guidance. But more importantly, she went, I will support you with some blood tests. So I was like, fantastic. So I went away knowing that I'd been listened to, but the most important thing for me was a eureka moment when the blood tests came back. And in 2023, I was diagnosed with subclinical hypothyroidism. So not enough to be medicated, but enough for it to be recognized. So at that point, I was like, oh, and what does that mean? Because you get diagnosed, don't you? But there's rarely any information provided at the point of diagnosis, certainly for those conditions that we have, which are the autoimmune ones. You kind of go, well, you have this now, and very little resources are provided.
And if it's not enough to need medication, then we just got to keep waiting. Wait until it gets worse. Here you go. Wait till it gets worse. But it sounds like you had a positive experience from your doctor in that you felt heard, listened to. You weren't being kind of told, at least at that point, it's all in your head, or you're lazy, or you're crazy, or you just got to eat less and exercise more. It sounds like she listened, and took you seriously, which is great, is what we would expect. But that's really lovely that you got that, and she organised the test. So that sounds like a good doctor. Yeah.
And that became, like I say, it's a eureka moment for me, because at last it's not just all in my head, because we sometimes just think, am I just going crazy? And is it just me? So I think the most empowering thing at that point was, where can I go and find information? And Annabelle, I stumbled on an amazing podcast, and I would like to thank you right now for all your help, inspiration from myself, but also from all of your followers, because without your podcast, I wouldn't be doing the things that I'm doing today. So a heartfelt thank you to you. And I hope that comes with the emotion behind that as well. So thank you, Annabelle, for everything.
Thank you.
So your podcast became the center of my world, and I started at number 1, listened all the way through, quickly realized that you were going to be an immense resource for me, and purchased your book on the back of that. So I was really excited to kind of go, oh my God, there's a book that goes with this. What can I learn in addition to that? I then kind of went and started to explore. I've got this condition that is affecting in essence, to me, my thyroid, my throat, and I could feel it. There was always pressure there.
Yeah.
So I then went, well, that's the output. So what is the actual cause? What is the trigger? And I hadn't heard of Hashimoto's disease. I hadn't heard of antibodies or anything of that. So in the UK, there are several companies that you can pay for your own private tests. So I did a lot of research, and through that, I did two things at the same time. So the first thing was I cut out dairy, and I cut out some of the other simple triggers like gluten. I was focused on, so dairy and gluten. And whilst I was doing that, I then paid for some food intolerance tests. What I wanted to do was to take out the guesswork.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And before you go on with that, Craig, can I just, because I think then I've got lots of questions and I know you've got lots to share around that. Can I just go back and ask, so you had a lot going around the time like that from 2019 through to 2023. You had, sounds like a lot of different symptoms, fatigue and muscle pain and I think you've mentioned feeling cold and, a number of those different kind of common symptoms that you Googled. If you look back, like further than 2019, now that you've got the benefit of hindsight, can you see things that might have been there much earlier that perhaps you have now connected, but at the time not?
Yeah. It is fascinating once you get the formal diagnosis and doing that reflection piece against all of the myriad of symptoms that we can have. It is fascinating when you do look back to go, ooh, what if? So I will go back to my late teens where I developed a lot of stress, anxiety, depression. So that's always been an undercurrent within my life. And there were some significant dark days there. And as part of my journey to understand me and to not to keep repeating and falling down those dark holes, I actually trained to be a counsellor, not to counsel and practice with anybody else, although I have supported some people, but more to unpack what was going on for me and to give myself some tools in my toolkit. So certainly around that was the stress, the anxiety, underpinned by the constant weight gain, weight loss. So I guess between the ages of mid-20s to 45, so a good 20-year period, the weight was up and down. As we know, it's easier to lose the weight, isn't it, whilst when we're younger. And then I think the onset of the thyroid issues just slows all of that down significantly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Certainly more recently, I've always been a coldish person. However, certainly past few years, I'm never far away from a pair of gloves, never far away from a blanket. And I recognize that, sadly, my mum passed away a few years back. But I recognize that myself and my mum had we had a love affair with blankets. And I just thought that was something me and my mum had in common.
That's interesting. Well, you do live in a cold place, but
but not in the middle of
I saw
summer.
that There was a comment in the Facebook group between you and Helen, and Helen's in the UK as well, saying, "Oh, I don't think Annabelle will understand the cold hands and feet thing." But you'd be surprised, because in Brisbane, which is, we are a tropical, we're really tropical, but our houses are not built for the winter. Like, we're built for the summer. And so often in winter I do have, gloves, and, my feet are always cold. And so, I mean, I can imagine, and I have traveled to colder places that, I imagine that's like a chronic thing all through winter. But
it's the summertime as well, so I'm never far away from a blanket.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay,
yeah.
right.
So Chris and Josh just kind of walk past me and laugh at me quite often when I'm buried in. They're wearing their shorts and their shorts and vests and things like that. And I've got layers. But that's just part of it. I only do extremes though, so I'm either extremely cold, or then all of a sudden it goes the other way. The thermostat kind of kicks in. I get extremely hot. So it is fascinating when you look at, I guess, hormones. We're doing a big drive in work at the moment around menopause. So actually looking at the menopause symptoms compared to the thyroid symptoms. Very similar, because it's all hormone based, isn't it? So I have a lot of empathy for the females on this world going through those challenges. So you've got an ally with me over here today.
Yeah, well, thank you. And then a number of the women that are listening will appreciate that, because there is a lot of overlap in symptoms, and there are a lot of women diagnosed with thyroid conditions during menopause. So it's a really critical time to make sure that you are getting your thyroid tested as well, to know if it's that or if it is just menopause. Good point.
Some of the things that came up for me as I've done the reflection is I didn't realize how jumpy I am as a person. So I wouldn't say nervous, but certainly very easily startled. So somebody could just walk past me and I've not realized they're there, and all of a sudden I'm kind of leaping out of my skin. But again, looking to my mum, she was diagnosed with some autoimmune conditions. So had not thyroid issues, arthritis was one of her conditions. She also had a hiatus hernia, so some eating disorders were part of that. So I recognise that between that and her being cold and things, that there was similarities with myself. And I also recall that she gave up her driving license at an early-ish age because she just got too nervous on the road. So I kind of linked that.
You wonder if she might have actually had thyroid condition but not known.
Yeah, absolutely. Sadly, I do have a cousin called Bev who passed away following some complications with Crohn's disease as well. So, when you kind of sit back and look at the family more holistically, and they're the conditions that I know. So I also wonder genetically what else is not being spoken about, which is part of my driver to be quite vocal about things. It's not about, ooh, look at me, in the sense of I want pity, I want sorrow, whatever the right words are there. It's about, look at this, look what you can do, get fascinated by it, because the other side of that is a world where you feel better, which is a world that I've discovered.
So that world that you've discovered because you've been fascinated by your hypothyroidism, your Hashimoto's, you've gone digging and finding, and you found this podcast, which I'm grateful for, because when I started it, I had no real idea of how it would progress, I suppose. And so just to know that, there are people that there's you, and also I do know other people that listen and get something out of it is great. That makes it all worthwhile from my perspective. But, tell me, you started to tell me about some food, down the food path, and getting some intolerance testing and cutting out sort of the gluten and dairy. So tell me a little bit about what you've found that's worked or is working so far for you from the food perspective, particularly given that you're a foodie and that's been a big change?
Absolutely. So the first things that I did was to cut out the dairy and start down the gluten-free avenue. As I was doing that, within 2 weeks, I did feel a lot better. So it was more or less immediately. Please don't judge me. I also gave up coffee. Purely because I couldn't face coffee with a coconut or a milk or an oat milk. It wasn't quite the same. So coffee is a rare treat for me now. So yeah, I gave up those things and artificial sweetener because I thought if I'm not having a coffee, I might as well stop the artificial sweetener because I'm not having it in anything else anyway. So exploring that journey, that's when I had the food intolerances done, and I also did a check on vitamins and minerals as well. So there was kind of and there was an environmental test. There was 3 lots of tests that I completed in quick succession. The vitamins and minerals, they came back relatively okay. However, even though I drink a lot of water, I was borderline dehydrated, which is fascinating.
That is
I was severely low on vitamin D, on vitamin D. From an environmental point of view, most of the things tested were in normal range, apart from dust mites. I've got a very small intolerance to dust mites. It is what it is. The most interesting, though, were the food intolerances. So my intolerances are, and it goes on a scale of 0 to 100. So my most significant intolerance at 100 was cow's milk. So I am absolutely right. Cut out dairy. So not sure if that just means the lactose or if it's cow's milk generally. So
could be the casein, because it's often it could be the lactose, but it could also be the casein. Yeah.
That was my top scoring one. So quite challenging for me. Cheese was one of my go-to treats.
I know, so, dairy's hard. It is hard.
Yeah. Once in a blue moon, we're okay with that. So the next one was wheat intolerance. So not gluten, but wheat itself. So that's been a challenge in terms of pasta, pizzas, pies, bread.
All that comfort food.
Oh yeah, I do like. You can hear it in the voice, can't you? Oh yeah, let's have some sandwiches. Let's have a cheese sandwich.
Cold climate food too, isn't it? It's cold. It is that hardy cold climate.
Yeah. The next one was eggs. So variance intolerance to both the egg white and the egg yolk. So intolerance to both. Another one was flaxseed. So I'd introduced flax seeds into my diet a couple of years ago for the health benefits. So that was an interesting one. But the final one and the most significant one for me is yeast. And that's all types of yeast.
Right.
So that includes any kind of yeast products, anything that has natural yeast. So if you think grapes and blueberries, sometimes they have that little white kind of look about them, don't they?
All right.
So that's a natural yeast in there. Technically, mushrooms are part of a yeast family. So all mushroom products. So we have a product called Quorn in the UK. So I used to use Quorn as a meat substitute. I do eat meat, but sometimes I like that variety. It is really interesting because then you start to look at any fermented products then. So malted vinegar or any products containing malted vinegar. Anything, like the fermented pickles and things like that, the kimchi, etc.
That you don't do well with those, or no?
It's technically fermented, which is then part of a yeast reaction.
Okay.
So, and then you start looking at I could find some wheat-free bread, but I can't find any yeast-free bread. You can do sourdoughs, but then you're going into, is a sourdough made of wheat? So it's really fascinating. So when part of my journey has been to spend Saturday mornings within the UK, our supermarkets open 6 a.m., 7 a.m. So I go to the Slimming World Club for 8 o'clock in the morning. So I spend those 2 hours on a Saturday morning being a little bit of a detective. So quite often found reading all the labels in the supermarket just to figure out if there's anything new I can have.
Yeah.
It has been a fascinating journey. So between the wheat, the eggs, and the yeast, I look at most processed foods, and they're no longer something that I choose to eat purely because there's a potential that's going to trigger my reaction to my Hashimoto's and make me feel worse. So I get fascinated about what is the next thing. So we have some nice, fresh produce in the UK. And quite often I walk past something and go, I do not know what that is. So I will pick it up and I will bring it home and I'll go, what can I do with this?
That's great.
Yeah. So there's
what's the weirdest thing that you brought home?
Cassava, I think it is, which is
cassava. It's like a root vegetable.
It's a root vegetable. Didn't realize that you should technically soak it for 24 hours because it contains cyanide. So you have to be very careful when you're exploring new things. Yeah.
So I think is that used a lot in South America, cassava, maybe?
South Africa, I think it is.
South Africa.
The African continent. Yeah. Right. So Okay. But for me, it's what's that? Let's get interested by things. I very much judged avocado from a distance for a long while. Actually, it's turned into a staple in my kitchen purely because it's quick, simple, and it's a healthy fat as well. So
it's such a good one.
Yeah. So a lot of the food that I was eating pre-Hashimoto's is no longer a feature often within my world. So I've gone down a really simple route. An example of that is when you look at gravies and things like that in the UK. So gravies and stocks, they all contain yeast. So I've gone back to home cooking. So I now make my own vegetable stock, and I've got there's some really nice big frozen ice trays that you can get. So I batch cook vegetable stock. When I do a roast chicken, I use the chicken bones then to create a chicken stock. So I do a lot of cooking for the freezer. So Saturday afternoons then I am quite often found in the kitchen creating either for my work lunches or for the freezer, so I know I can make sure that I'm having a well-balanced diet in the grand scheme of things. So,
yeah, wow. So you've done a really good job of being both inquisitive and experimental and taking that, like I said, that really positive approach. So what are common meals for you now that perhaps are different but that you're enjoying? Like what would you what do you enjoy?
So I approach my diet I like routine. I am a creature of habit. So for me, a morning is generally speaking a smoothie. So that's where I add in my coconut milk to get the calcium. So very dedicated in terms of making sure I get all the essential minerals and vitamins and all of that. So a smoothie is my go-to. I vary it in terms of fruits. I've tried some of the vegetable smoothies, not quite in my keeping there. I like the kind of mangoes and pineapples and things like that.
A little bit sweet.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, for things like work lunches, we're in, as you say, in the UK at the moment, we're in the kind of coming towards the wintry months. So I'm a big fan of things like casseroles, stews. I make a mean butternut squash and sweet potato soup at the moment in time. So
nice.
Yeah, like those kind of hearty meals. During the summer months, I tend to do things like chicken and maybe 5 or 6 different vegetables in my kind of work box then, to bring that into work with me. I vary those week in, week out, so I don't have the same vegetables every week so I don't get fatigued with everything. Annabelle, I remember on one of your podcasts that you said that you fall in love with salads. You are absolutely right. So because I have my relatively big lunch when I get home for my dinner in the evening, that tends to be a simple go to the fridge, grab the cold meats, grab the salads, let's throw something creative together. I have, through my own exploration and through reading your book and then reading other books on the back of that, I've made the decision to really limit grains in my life. So really embracing that kind of AIP diet where we stick to, I'll say, the plants and the vegetables, supported by meat proteins and things like that. So that's where I tend to base my main life on. One of the things that you advised was around journaling and keeping a track on things. So Sunday mornings in my house, I figure out my supplements. So I do supplement my diet. But as I'm doing that, I'm also journaling and tracking what fruits and vegetables and things that I'm eating. So my aim is always to have a mix of at least 25 different fruits and veg across the week, just to make sure I'm getting that rich.
That's really impressive.
Yeah. So because I have got to limit some of those fruits and veg. So let's go back. So mushrooms, grapes, and blueberries, for example, are out. I can have them once in a while, but it's not it's got to be a conscious decision for me. I just want to make sure that I am getting enough good stuff going into my system. Your podcast last week resonated with me again. So the last podcast was all around the stomach biome. So I supplement my life based on a couple of things. So the vitamin D, as I mentioned before, was significantly low. So I was able to share all of my test results with my doctor. So she's helped me to understand those. I also had, as part of my testing, the paid test that I did for the food intolerances, there was a half an hour counseling session with a dietitian. So she was able to signpost me and give me advice and alternatives to things like soy sauce. Again, it's a fermented product. So there's an amino acid that you can have that tastes more or less very similar to soy sauce. So there's alternatives out there. So on the back of speaking to my doctor and also seeking to understand around my gut biome and things like that, I do supplement my my diet, and I do an AM and a PM supplementation. So and also a short term and long term. So what I've discovered as part of my own personal journey is now I've got to continue supplementing things like the vitamin D daily. So my doctor prescribed a 4-week treatment where I was super boosted on that to get me back into the normal range. But now a daily vitamin D is keeping me within that normal parameters. So the other things that I add into that are things like turmeric. So don't like the taste of turmeric.
No, it's a strong taste.
Actually, you can get some quite simple tablets that I just add into that. I've always taken things like the cod liver oil, omega-3, because that's an essential oil, isn't it, in the grand scheme of things. So I kind of boost those daily. In the evenings, then that's when I take things like magnesium and zinc, because generally speaking, if you've got autoimmune conditions, you need, supplement those kind of things just to help your body process everything that goes on in the inside. So I do look at those as being a long-term supplementation because I feel better when I'm taking those. It is a little bit of trial and error. I remember taking, is it ashwagandha?
Yeah.
there's a supplement.
There
Yeah.
is, yeah.
Yeah, that
Didn't.
gave me really vivid nightmares. So I had to
Yeah.
quickly come off that because it just wasn't for me.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that you can go either way with ashwagandha. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I had to recognize that some of my supplements, and I was supplementing before some of the tests as well. So at one point I was on lion's mane. Well, that's from the mushroom family. So
Yes.
again, I had to look at all the ingredients. I've done a lot of research on the supplements that I choose to make sure that they are suitable for my own intolerances as well. I did a schoolboy error when I gave up the dairy. I do like cheese, as I've said before. So one of the things I swapped it for was a natural yeast, and actually didn't realize at the time all I did was swap one intolerance food with another intolerance food.
Well,
So it is
you
trial
do
and
what you
error.
do. Yeah. When you know better, you can do better. It sounds like that's
Yeah,
the approach that you've taken, is that, you add to your knowledge and you make the
yeah,
changes. So, yeah,
yeah,
that's great, Craig. So, yeah, there's been a lot of, I can see the, um, you know, the strategy and the what's the word, method. You've been very methodical, it
yeah,
sounds like. Yeah.
yeah,
One of the things I wanted to ask you about, to sort of change tack a little bit, because I mean, you've been very encouraging in the Let's Talk Thyroid community, and and I think support, and your support, I would say that's part. I love it when people in the group post things, and sometimes getting that sharing can be a bit of a challenge sometimes. So if you're listening and you're in the group, post and comment and share. But I can see that. Even just in you, say, going and doing your counselling course, you're obviously a person that really cares deeply and wants to encourage others. Tell me about your support, and how has support played into your thyroid story?
yeah. So as I've mentioned before, I've got my partner Chris and Josh, so they've been fully supportive. I remember speaking to my best friends about how Hashimoto's was going to become my personality for a while.
Okay. Yeah.
We didn't know what that meant at the
Mm-hmm.
time. So I've got all of these food intolerances. So I will just shout out to my kind of best mates, best friends, Lorraine, Barry, Liz and Kathy for this. So I remember speaking to them going, don't worry about social events, because if we go anywhere, I am sure there's going to be something that I'll be able to eat that won't trigger me. And an example of that is most restaurants in the UK will do steak, chips, and salad. That's all perfectly fine within my world. The only thing I do is take my own little spray bottles with me that contain some olive oil and contain some white vinegar, because that doesn't trigger me. So I just have to think a little bit outside the box there. So certainly from their point of view, what we do before we go anywhere, we do a quick look at the menu. We just make sure that there's a couple of options available. And once we find that, let me just say, a safe place, then that becomes part of our normal, let's go back there because it was a really nice meal. The thing that I have said to my support network around all of this is they are food intolerances. They're not allergies. So I can have them once in a blue moon. And it is once in a blue moon because part of my journey has been to make sure that going back to the stomach biome, is that I'm doing whatever I can to protect that as part of the long-term strategy as well. So what I find is every now and then I can have, I don't want to call it a treat because I don't want to frame it as being a treat, but I can have, I don't know, a cheese on toast, for example, which was one of my favorite meals. So I just have that as a once in a blue moon special occasion piece without thinking and worrying about it. It is really interesting because I do notice the symptoms now once I've had those items in my diary, in my diet. And I recognize that everybody is unique as well. So what works for me may not work for the next person anyway. And you know what? We are all made up of different things, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. So have you noticed, I mean, for example, like if you still got your frozen shoulder and your neck pain, like have you noticed changes in how you feel in your body as that? Yeah.
Yeah. So the trapezium myalgia, which is the shooting pain up the neck, since I gave up dairy, etc., more or less non-existent anymore.
Wow.
The shoulder pain is a constant with me. However, so for the past 4 weeks, I've been at a 1 out of 10. So just that really faint awareness in the background.
Yep.
I have been doing a lot of work on, like I say, I went on holiday, and I know we're coming up to Christmas. So what I wanted to do was to supplement my stomach biome. So I've been taking pre and probiotics as part of my smoothie supplement. There's all sorts of things that if you go and research could help. So one thing I've been on is elm's bark as a supplement to
slippery elm. Is it like it's like
yeah. So what that does, it meant to increase the kind of mucus lining that we've got in there as well. So I'm doing all that as a proactive piece. But what I've noticed in the past 4 weeks was that I have felt significantly well for me. So, that I always know because I'm not having to put on any of the ibuprofen creams or anything like that before bed, sleeping better. I think we all have the challenges of waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, which is good for me. I get up and I have my thyroid medication at that point and then go back to bed. So, but I've noticed my quality of sleep has improved. So if I get 6-7 hours, it's been a good 6-7 hours. So certainly past 4 weeks as I've done, I guess the supplementation, but also the limiting, restricting, or eating well. I feel so much better. And there's a little bit of a proud moment, I guess, since I've been on this journey since June this year, was when I made all the changes, and that's when I moved out of subclinical to full hypo and started to get medicated. At that point, that's when I made the significant changes for me. And since that journey, I'm close to 3 stone down. So
wow, that's
I'm in
a lot.
control. Yeah. And I'm in control.
That's amazing,
and
Craig.
And that confidence is coming through as well. And it's being recognized by other people as well. So yeah, really good at the moment. Really good.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, really, in less than 12 months, you've completely changed your diet, your lifestyle, your health, and your trajectory for your, future for how you manage your health. Like that's really
absolutely.
is inspiring. That's impressive. You've taken a
Thank
full, I think that's the type A personality at its finest, isn't it? It really is using all the good sides of that. And we know there's a few downsides, but that's using all of that good of like, right, I'm on a mission. I'm going to sort myself out. I'm going to find out, I'm going to explore. I'm going to be fascinated. I'm going to, try different things. The fact that you've kept a journal and you're methodical about it, you're doing far better than me. I'm not as scientific as that sometimes. I get too impatient, but but when you can do that, that's really helpful because you're really going to make those make the connections faster. And so. I want to say massive congratulations because it's not easy.
No.
And you've done it and you're doing it with a smile and you're encouraging, inspiring other people. Hats off to you, Craig.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I will just mention work, if I may. So
yeah, absolutely. Please do.
and a shout out really to my boss, lovely lady called Jen. So as I've been going through the challenges of my journey, I have been meeting with Jen quite often to talk my medical conditions and all of the things there. It's important, I guess, in terms of the role that I do. So there are those moments when I get brain fog and I come into work and I don't know what day of the week it is. So having that support from Jen has also enabled me to drop down to working 4 days a week as part of managing my health and conditions. So just having that extra day that is my day. And sometimes we get fatigued, don't we? So there's those days where if I just need to pull the blanket over and recharge, then I know that in the next few days, I'm going to be back to my normal fighting fit and all of that. But I also use that additional day to, I guess, to make sure that I'm looking after myself even better. So that's if I make physio appointments, if it's that well-being piece. So I use that day in terms of, I guess, my mental and spiritual healing journey as well, because I believe that it's all about balance. So, you know, we've got to be inside and out and everything aligned and balanced and all of that. So yeah, it's important just to kind of go, I am a type A personality, so I like being full in the mix of it, stressed, pressure, but also you've got to be able to find that mechanism where you allow yourself just to stop, rest and recharge, and that is perfectly healthy as well.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, so proactive too, you know, in terms of, and to have supportive boss, supportive work environment. Was that a difficult decision for you to drop back that 1 day a week?
It wasn't difficult. I've been quite fortunate in this current career to be, I'll say, offered promotions and things like that, where I joined at a middle management level because I wanted to simplify my life from my previous employer. So my previous employer, there was a lot of road travel, there was lots of miles in a car, I had 2 sites and so on and so forth. So what I wanted to do was move to a company that was relatively local for me, so I wasn't doing hotel stays, etc. So it's, I don't know, the planets kind of aligned that then went, oh, there's an opportunity for me to do that. And along with taking a promotion a few years back with Jen, it just allowed me to kind of go, I can do that, both, I guess, financially, because that's always a consideration, isn't it? I can do that financially, but more importantly, my health was going, you need to start looking after your health more seriously than I was before. So that became my priority as opposed to anything else. Yeah,
that's great. Yeah. Well, to be able to recognize that and do it and have the work environment that supports that too, you know, that's, that's really helpful because it's such a big part of life and often is where a lot of the stress sits. So that's great. Craig, look, I think we can probably talk for ages. I've got a few more questions I want to ask.
Okay.
And then, but I am mindful of your time. You've probably got to go off to work as well. So, like I know it's been, in a sense, it's been a short, a short part of the journey. I don't think anyone's thyroid journey is ever short. No. It's always a long history. But, now knowing what you know now, anything that you'd go back and do differently or say to your newly diagnosed self, or to someone that's listening that might be in a, feeling a bit overwhelmed, like what's your advice to either yourself or other people?
The first thing, and I posted this into your Facebook group a while back, it's not your fault. So we are subjected to things going on in our body that we don't recognize at that time. The moment that I got the Hashimoto's diagnosis it was a phenomenal moment for me. And I think I've rarely cried on my journey, and I have, but I think it was that point where I just sat down, I cried for a little bit just to release that emotion that I'm not going crazy, that all of these symptoms now make sense because I've been looking at them as individual symptoms, but actually you scoop them all together, and that's just part of who we are now. So it's not your fault. So just give yourself that time, that headspace, and that forgiveness, really. It is and can be overwhelming. So you gifted me, Annabelle, with the mindset of this hasn't happened overnight, so I don't need to fix it overnight. If I can just do my mantra is change one thing per week, and in 52 weeks you've changed 52 things.
Yeah, that's a lot when you think of it like that, isn't it? Yeah, that's right.
So it's just do one thing, just do that little thing that you're able to do, and then think about the next thing after that. And before you realize it, you've stacked all of these beautiful changes, and you can recognize how far you've come. And I think I guess if I was to give the younger self me any kind of words of wisdom is, you know what, it is okay. You will find the answers. You will find your tribe, your support network, and to go and be fascinated, because there's amazing people out there like yourself, Annabelle, that inspire and give people answers or signpost us to the possibility of those answers. And if you are in any doubt, just shout out. You know, I do like to share my journey. That's not to be, ooh, look at me, but that's to give other people insights and other people hope, and to allow people to ask me the questions. So a little bit like yourself, Annabelle, I'm a bit driven to help and inspire other people on my journey as well. So.
Yeah, and you do. And obviously, even what I've seen within my little, group, you do. And I know that, if that's what you're doing with a group of people you don't know, like in amongst your own personal network and, family and friends and, community, the different communities that you're part of, you'd be doing that too. So this is how we change the world is, by influencing those around us. So,
yeah.
So that's, thank you. I do want to say, when I, you'll know, I said a basic questionnaire of just a few questions before the show, and I usually say, have you got any questions for me? And you're the first person that's wrote questions for me. And so I don't know if you want to ask them or you want me. I mean, I'm happy to answer the questions that you had for me, because this is part of sharing stories. If you've got the questions, then other people might have the questions. So do you remember what they are, or do you want me to go over them? Or?
I vaguely remember what they are. So I think the first one was something along the lines of, what 3 things are you most proud of your journey, or would you have done differently in your journey?
You said, what are the 3 things in your journey you wish someone had shared with you sooner?
That's that. So what are those 3 things, Annabelle? Welcome to Craig's podcast, Annabelle. So what 3 things?
I love it. I mean, I think for me, when I was diagnosed was a long time ago, and it was before any of this knowledge, was certainly in any public forum. It was before the internet. So, but I think if I had have known back then, just to know that diet and lifestyle is an important part of the piece of the puzzle, and just to acknowledge that, that would have been helpful. I think the other thing that would have been helpful for me to really digest sooner was the impact that stress has. And my body's, I'm a bit like you, I'm very easily startled. I think I feel like by and large I handle stress pretty well, but I think my body response is much more sensitive to stress than my soul and spirit is, I think generally. And so just really understanding the impact that stress has. that would have been good to know before I had 3 little kids, because I don't think I coped with being a mum to 3 little kids very well. And so I do wonder if I had have known about managing my health holistically and managing the stress, I like to think I would have been a nicer mum. So
Okay.
I may not have been as possible too, but I think just that I was quite irritable. I think that
Yeah.
irritability and intolerance, and I like to be in control, and you can't really control 3 little kids, and just I think if I had have understood that better, that would have been good.
Yeah.
So
And don't forget, we're not given a parenting handbook, are we, when we have
no,
children? We
we're
just have to
certainly
make
not.
this up as we go along. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. So that's some of the things. You also asked me about, what do I wish I'd never done, as part of, or what do I wish I had have avoided? Because I have talked
Yeah.
about taking that weight loss medication in the past, so definitely I would have avoided that, but I've already said that. I think one of the things that I did that I enjoyed at the time, but in retrospect was not good for my body, was Bikram yoga,
Okay.
which is, do you know what Bikram yoga is?
No, I was going to get you to explain that one to me.
Yeah, it's really hot yoga. You do yoga in a 40-degree temperature room,
Ooh.
and I really enjoyed it at the time. But it was too much. It was too much on my body. I pushed my.
Yeah.
I ended up injured because you got to think when you're warmer, you can bend more. Yeah, and I just think the stress of it it wasn't helpful. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
wouldn't do Bikram yoga again as much as in retrospect.
And there's an
Yeah.
interesting piece there around um, exercise and everything with our conditions as well, isn't there? So
Yeah. Yeah.
I've recognized that my body is already stressed out just functioning day to day, and I've attempted to be a gym member and do, I don't know, couch to 5K and those kind of things.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work for me. It's too much. It just tips the balance too much for me. So for me, my greatest actions have been going for walks. So I'm quite fortunate. I live in a access to river walks and things like that. So the gentle exercise for me is much more healthier than trying to be, I don't know, full body combat kind of person. It's not. Yeah, it's too much.
Yeah, I know. And we've talked about that on other episodes. And I've definitely been, not just the Bikram yoga, like I did all of the thing, like even before I was probably in this season, just before I was diagnosed or around my kind of early to mid 20s, I was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to the gym before I went to work to, run on the treadmill. And then I'd go and eat Turkish bread toast with jam and and a cappuccino. I'm like, oh my gosh, I felt like I really knew nothing. But yes, the exercise component, I've definitely done lots of that
And well done,
over
Annabelle,
exercise.
because I know that you're part way through your own gym activities at home, aren't you? That your son's designed for you. So well done on that.
Thank you. And look, I think I'm in a good health place, so I can take on a little bit more. And I'm doing Charlie's written me a program, which has been really helpful because I like structure, and I haven't stopped exercising for a while, but I just wasn't in a good routine. And so, I didn't really kind of feel like I had purpose when I went into the gym. So now I've got that, and I feel like I'm getting stronger, and it's good. So thank you for that encouragement as well.
No problem.
Now, I think the last question, well, you asked me about can I do a show on essential oils? And so if you are listening and you're thinking, I want to know a bit more about essential oils, I haven't talked about them for a while, to be fair, but there are 2 episodes. So if you're listening and you think, I want to know a little bit more about essential oils, episode 21 and episode 82, specifically on essential oils. And
Just gonna write that down. 21 and 82.
And 82. So 21 is just me. 20 and 82 is with Scott Johnson, who is an essential oil research expert. So that's a good one too. And in the context of toxins, which is kind of often where essential oils for me fit in terms of, there's actually, do you know the podcast Diary of a CEO?
Yes, that's one of the other ones that I follow.
So then I haven't listened. I've listened to just the promo, but I want to listen. Is an interview with a lady who's a toxicity expert, so talking all
Yeah,
about all things toxins. So I think if you're listening, go check that one out because she'll have a wealth of knowledge of, what to avoid. So I'm
yeah,
looking forward to listening to that one
me
myself.
too.
And then
And
yeah, you like that one?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then my last question was, is there any plans to do your book as an audio book?
Well, the short answer is yes. The longer answer is I've already tried. I've actually, when I put it out, when it first came out, I did look into doing an audiobook, and I've recorded about the first 4 chapters. And then I got stuck because to upload it onto Audible through Amazon, and I haven't researched this recently, but it was the case a couple of years ago, was that there was no easy way of doing it from Australia. You
Yeah,
had to go through a broker or an agent, and it was just going to cost too much to make it
yeah,
feasible. Um, but if that's changed, because it's looked like from other countries you could just upload the audio files yourself. So I should really look into that, because if it becomes the case where I can just upload the audio files, I can look at re-recording it and doing it, because I know that there are people. Obviously, if you like listening to a podcast, then you might like listening to an audiobook. So it's not
yeah.
been. I need to put it back on the list of things to um,
Yeah,
look
that'd
into.
be on my wish list. So yeah, put me down for one of those as well. If you ever get to that point.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, look, it certainly is on the. It's been on the back burner, but what I should do is look in to see just is it feasible, and then I can bring it a little bit further up. I think I've got a bit more capacity. It's been interesting, having gone back to work 3 days a week almost 12 months ago, and just sort of
Yeah,
finding that new rhythm for myself. I feel like I'm now in that rhythm, and I've got a bit more capacity again. So I probably could look at that for maybe 2025. We'll see. Yeah.
brilliant. That sounds exciting.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Craig, for having me on the end of your podcast. And I do want to say thank you again for sharing your story. It does take courage to share your story, and I know that there will be many people that are listening that are going to have picked out little tidbits out of it that are going to encourage them and inspire them on their journey. So really appreciate having you here.
No, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for listening to my story. And as I've said before, thank you for being that inspiration in my life. So yeah, really appreciate the opportunity. And it's been amazing time today. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Thyroid. If you have enjoyed the content, or perhaps you're thinking, oh, my mum needs to hear this, or my sister, or my bestie, I would love it if you would share this episode with them. That really just helps spread the positive and practical message of Let's Talk Thyroid, and helps that broader thyroid community, our friends and family, to live well with their thyroid health. So you can just, share the episode. If you subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast, it's free. It's really helpful, because then you'll be notified every time a new podcast comes out, and it just makes it much easier to find. There's usually a little subscribe button or a bell, or follow often is the terminology. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be helpful. Of course, if you want to leave a review, even better, just a sentence or two about how the podcast has helped you. You can definitely connect with me via letstalkthyroid.com. That's where you'll find access to my book, my coaching, my freebies, and really everything that I offer in terms of thyroid support.